Hello, I'm here to drop in with all of you over here at Cobra's Medicine Bag. I drop in here on Thursdays while we're going through Panchakarma to support those who are um, in that process of transformation, but are also maybe navigating some food and body image issues or have a history of eating disorder. And so I wanted to just come by today and offer you all some support. I got comments on, and this is live. I thought we'd look at the holidays because the holidays tend to be a really challenging time for people that struggle with food and body image issues. There's a lot of concerns that can come up, and there's also a lot of emotionally activated stuff that can surface during the holiday season. Of course, you're seeing family that you haven't seen in a while or friends you haven't seen in a while. There can be interesting dynamics that are at play there. Some of this stuff can be activating. One thing about those who struggle with food or body image issues is that it's never about the food, okay? There's often something much deeper that's the undercurrent of that outer manifestation of having it be about the food. It really isn't about the food at all. It's in some way the food is taking on the role of scapegoat, or the way the body looks is being taken on as the scapegoat, the reason why there's an issue, the reason why there's dissatisfaction, the reason why there's this feeling of being divided or at war with oneself, or navigating self-esteem issues, feeling like you're not good enough, or feeling, just like you don't want to even be in your body. Okay. This is stuff that can come up for those that struggle with food and body image issues when they are feeling emotionally activated. And this is the piece that I will always bring in repeatedly when we're looking at food and body image issues, in particular around eating disorder. And I'm just going to refer to it as disordered eating, okay? It makes it just a lot cleaner and a lot easier to understand. Certainly on a clinical level, the criteria for having clinical eating disorder has a very set formula to it, but we know that that doesn't always apply, and that EDNOS does exist. That's eating disorder not otherwise specified. And this is when we're kind of in the gray area where it doesn't quite fit the clinical criteria, and yet at the same time, there's an issue, there's a problem, there's something that's causing struggle, and the person's having difficulty having a healthy relationship with food in their body. However that manifests, it can manifest in many different ways. And this is largely something that, a lot of people overlook. They think that you can always resolve issues with food and body image by, exercising more kind of control around food, or, kind of get into shaming people around the way their bodies look and think that's the source of motivation. And certainly this stuff kind of comes up more so when we're around the holidays, right? Because everybody's getting together with each other after not seeing each other for a while in some cases. And, you run into, that, loudmouth relative that just blurts out the first thing, the first thing at the top of their mind, without thinking about how it comes across. They comment about how you look like you put on a few or whatever. And all of these things, and just knowing that, you're going to have to be on and sort of, in the space where you're in the mood to celebrate and, be happy and cheerful. And there can be a lot of that pressure at this time of year too, that, you be on, that it's important that you're on at this time of year, and that you're ready to, interact with people that maybe, you have a lot of challenges with. Okay. Some people are alone at the holidays, and that can be difficult for them to navigate too. They get the blues at the holidays. I know for myself that around the holidays, I do really enjoy Christmas season. I enjoy Christmas season because I didn't really have Christmas as a kid, just because of my religious background, what I grew up in. That's why I love it so much as an adult, because it just reminds me of this this magic that I always felt like I missed out on as a kid. That being said, it still is a time of year when I feel a lot of melancholy. I mean, partially we experience this because the sun's not out as much, so that can affect things. It can affect our viewpoint. Getting that vitamin D is really important, but you can combat that really if you just get outdoors, get out in the sun, drink in the vitamin D. But for me, that melancholy comes from, I think it's from my childhood, and just my memories that are sort of like, stored within me. Around that kind of express themselves. I think that's also why I feel so melancholy, because one thing I discovered when I finally did, get to celebrate Christmas as an adult after not having it as a kid was that, like, wow, it's like, it's not what I thought it would be. I thought it would be like this real magical thing. And instead it was sort of this like people kind of putting on airs with each other, and there was always like some kind of dysfunction that circus that surfaced at the holidays. Yeah, sometimes it's a circus. Sometimes things get a little lit at the holidays, right? I mean, people deal with that too. There can be family drama that gets kind of played out at the holiday times, and this relative wants you to go to their house and that relative wants you to go there. And, if you're in a couple and you're trying to navigate that, that's even more complicated. And the blending of families, all of it. Okay. Oh, but I don't even remember what my original thought was. But yeah, it can be a circus, but there's a lot that can surface at the holidays, right? But what I'm basically experienced as an adult, experiencing Christmas for the first time, because I didn't really celebrate until I was 18. I think about 18 years old is when I really had like my first real experience of Christmas, maybe. I mean, I would attend things, but I always felt a little awkward about it, a little out of place around it. It's interesting. It took me some time to really get into the spirit of like, okay, I'm going to totally welcome this in. There was a lot to unpack there. By the time I did, I just felt like it was all like superficial, and there wasn't this feeling of togetherness, and there wasn't like this magic. It was more like it seemed like it was so much about obligation and doing what you're expected to do rather than what really feels right. And it was a time of high stress and a lot of pressure. You have to come up with all this money, and it really got so far away from what I saw in all those Christmas movies as a kid. So I think that for me, that's something I recently discovered, that was part of this time of year, the pressure and the melancholy. It related to my childhood. There's also been some losses I've experienced at this time of year as well. And just historically, throughout my life, there's been people that I was really close to that passed away during the holiday season. And so that's always kind of like at the forefront of my consciousness too. Certainly, loved ones who are no longer here with us are always really missed at the holidays. So it can just be a time when a lot can come up and there's a lot to navigate. And so I felt like I really wanted to bring this piece in for those who struggle with food and body image issues. How do you navigate the holidays? How do you navigate the holidays without being activated? Okay. And we'll only touch on it with this first live here. All right. We'll probably do a lot more lives like this, because as we get further into the holiday season, I think it can be really helpful to have an anchoring point, just a place to kind of touch base and just like see, how are you doing? I don't know. Maybe I'll put this up as a regular feature here during the holidays, just as a place to, touch base and people to share their experiences and have a little support, where they feel like they got a little bit of community that they can talk about these things with, because not everybody gets it. And sometimes, people don't want to talk about these things at the holidays because they're already activated as it is. So having some kind of like little support source you can drop in with can be helpful, Then there's also the piece of, okay, let's talk about it. I'm one of these people. I've been on a long weight release journey, and I'm really at the place where I'm ready to be more committed than I've been recently, mainly with things like just not going so overboard during the holidays. I think we all go overboard during the holidays. It's something that used to really bother me a lot, years ago while I was still more actively working on my recovery. I've come to accept that it's just kind of natural to overindulge at this time, but I also recognize that overindulgence and the after effects that it leaves me with, it tends to like just the weight of that is a little bit heavier for me. You know what I'm saying? Whereas people that have never had food or body image issues can kind of just like gloss over that. It's no big deal. And it's just, it's just another thing. For me, it brings up a lot of stuff. It throws me in a real self-reflective space. Like, oh, why did I overindulge there? Like, what was that about? And I've really gotten to the point where it's like, I don't want to have to do all that processing. You know what I'm saying? Around my food experiences at the holidays. And so I think it could be really helpful to just have sort of a support resource to drop in with, because even though I'm recovered from eating disorder, I still have to be mindful, of the things that triggered that, activated that behavior in the past, and understanding that if I'm going through an emotionally trying time or if things are stressful, then it's very important for me to be mindful and make sure that I'm not going into those spaces where I'm disconnecting or not being aware of my experiences, and instead kind of just using the excuse that, oh, it's the holidays and it's time to indulge, and, letting all that fly out the window, right? But it also doesn't need to be that serious either. So it's like finding the middle zone. And what I found it helps is having community, right? Just like having friends that you can talk to that also maybe deal with these kinds of issues, and just dropping in and sharing like what you're experiencing, what's coming up, or having somewhere to vent when somebody like made a comment or like, oh, you look like you're filling out a bit there, or people asking you about your diet, and you'll have a lot of that kind of come forward at the holidays too, because people are really hyper conscious about food at the holidays as well. Even people that don't necessarily have food or body image issues, they'll be talking a lot about this kind of stuff. They'll be talking about how, oh, they're worried about putting on weight. And there's like this hyper consciousness around all of it. So I think it can be something helpful to look at. And so I just wanted to kind of like talk about, how do you navigate that as an intuitive eater? How is the holidays different for an intuitive eater than it is for, let's say, somebody who doesn't have any food or body image issues? Or let's say you're just getting to intuitive eating. You've never done this before. You're not sure how to approach the holidays. It seems kind of complicated. Maybe you're starting to notice that as you're beginning to head closer to the holidays, you're feeling a little nervous about that. Like, oh, I'm used to having like a real set plan that keeps me from putting on a lot of weight at the holidays. Maybe you're used to really restricting yourself from indulging at the holidays, or only allowing yourself certain days when you indulge, these kind of things. So I think it's been helpful to open up a discussion about it. And I'm going to go ahead and get some cards on the board too. We'll bring in a conversation with the cards about it. This feels about right here. Yeah, we got the Two of Wands in reverse. Like, some of you aren't sure how to navigate the holidays, but what you do know is that you don't want to, feel like you're backsliding or like you're regressing into old behaviors. For those of you who have been really listening to your body for a while, you've been intuitive eaters for a while, you just want to make sure that you're not, taking a step back in terms of just being really present with your experiences, whatever they are. And this is the time when it's important to, also think about this energy here. Like, maybe there's times when you need to, block off, some opinions, block off some commentary on your food choices. And maybe also just create some space for yourself. You know, some of you may be in this space where you're like, you know what, I don't even want to participate in the holidays. Some of you may be feeling activated right now. Just remember, it's Scorpio season. It'll pass. It'll pass. This is kind of an intense time right now that we're going through, and Pluto is really front and center. So you may be feeling like that. You may be feeling like, I don't want to even think about it. I don't want to go to any of the holiday celebrations. Maybe it's something that's very activating for you. Maybe it's time when you usually feel really isolated. And if you're currently in a recovery process because you know, you just reached out for help, or you're finally getting yourself some support, you're finally acknowledging, like, yes, I really do have an issue with this. You may notice that you have a tendency to isolate. Okay, maybe this is something that's coming forward for you. I think it's important for you to move out of that isolation because it did come in reverse. Okay, and what's different about this Two of Wands in the Paulina Tarot is that instead of having a wand on, like a stave on each side where there's a clear open view, this person has them crisscrossed over them. It's almost like a big, like, no, you know? So maybe you constantly find yourself turning down the food at holiday gatherings as well. Maybe that's your normal MO. Maybe if you're a chronic dieter, you have a history of, you know, sticking to your diet, very, you know, focused, and you don't allow yourself any indulgences. Now that you're starting to explore intuitive eating, you're a little bit nervous, you know, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose control around the food. And then soon you find you're not even enjoying the time because you're so stressed out about your food choices, right? So let's have a look at this. We'll talk about practicalities. How can you have some different tips, some different tools to put in your toolbox to navigate this terrain, especially if you're just getting into intuitive eating. And I relate to these things because, like I said, it can be an activating time of year for me too. That means I have to be aware, just like any other person, that I could have the opportunity available to overindulge. It does tend to be a time when it's pretty easy to overindulge. I know that for me, I have a history of this. If I'm feeling like I need to create boundaries for myself, people don't look at this a lot. You know, sometimes people wonder, why do people, you know, binge? Okay. Because after I dealt with my own bout of anorexia, that became like my other side of the story. Things shifted for me, you know, and it came after I put on a lot of weight in recovery. I started to feel very frustrated because no matter how well I was nourishing my body and following the medical guidelines, it just seemed like my body was rebelling on me. I didn't understand that that had nothing to do with the food, that had everything to do with the fact that I had thrown my body into crisis. And so it learned to really conserve the energy. And that's how you have to look at food. Food is energy. And it's ironic because in order to repair the metabolism after it's gone through that kind of deprivation and has been compromised like that, it actually requires you to really learn how to listen to your body again and nourish yourself and not deny yourself. Okay. It's so important for your body, your biology, to feel like there's food security. It's like you may know that on an intellectual level. You're like, well, there's plenty of food in the cupboard. It's like I can go and grab something to eat whenever I want. But your body, you know, the biology doesn't understand that. You know, your biology only knows that, you know, you're not eating, you're denying yourself certain things. Maybe its energy demands aren't being met. Okay, so this is a lot of stuff that we have to look at these times, how we can allow the holidays also to throw us in this place where we start to get hyper controlled around the food. Okay, we start to make it about the food because there's emotionally activating stuff going on. It's not really about the food. It's about what the food represents to you. That it's a way for you to feel in control of something. All right. And this is why a lot of people that are in recovery or have food or body image issues tend to feel that things get a lot more intense around the holidays. The reason why they tend to struggle more or might feel activated more is because there's a lot more opportunities, not only to be around the things that maybe they're not used to allowing themselves to have, right? Because they practice so much restriction with their diets, but it's also, there's a lot of loaded emotional experiences potentially that could be activating forces to go into those coping mechanisms, to numb it out, to disconnect. It can be seen a lot of different ways. I've found that binging is usually sort of like more of a kind of like an FU kind of thing. You know what I mean? Um, I can see it sometimes as being like having a case of the fuck it's, having a case of the fuck it's just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go ahead and eat it because I never let myself have it. It can be a little bit of a rebellion, but because you're viewing it as something bad or something naughty, like this is going to earn me a lump of coal in my stocking if I just let myself enjoy the fudge. I mean, come on. How often does your grandma make that fudge? She makes it during the holidays. Like, there's nothing wrong with indulging a bit and enjoying it. And, you can always take leftovers home and you can enjoy it as often as you want through the holidays. But the main thing is just you got to listen to your body. If it starts feeling like you're getting a little too full, like back off. Maybe you will eat more rich foods than you normally do. Maybe you will have more sweets than you normally do. All right, but if you approach it gently and sensitively, for those of you who are really like hyper restrictors, you're used to really limiting yourself and what you're allowed to have, you got to approach it more sensitively. All right. If you look at it as having a free for all, it may be too supremely activating for you. All right. This could drive your behaviors into overdrive. It could have the opposite effect. If you're like, well, okay, I'm lifting all food restrictions, that might be very scary. So we have to really look at the level that you step into this. So maybe it's also about like taking a time out for a moment, like what are you ready to step into with intuitive eating around this as well? And understanding that as you come to the path of intuitive eating, there's a learning curve with that. Okay. And it takes a little time to get acclimated. And so maybe initially you do need to have certain framework in place for you to feel safe around exploring foods that you normally wouldn't explore on your day-to-day basis. Okay. So I think this is actually a really good time to work with the principle of intuitive eating that is about lifting food restrictions. All right. So we're going to begin with a little exercise here that I want you all to work with. And I think that this will really benefit you and just sort of like bringing a little bit more levity around it so it's not such a serious, stressful thing for you. And also so you can do it in a balanced way where it doesn't feel like you're getting too out of control with it or overdoing it. And to an outsider, somebody who doesn't struggle with food or body image issues, that might not make sense. But if you put it in the framework of it's really the same trip, it's just a different, it's a different focus. Okay. For somebody that's an alcoholic, okay, for example, you can understand how it can be a real driving force, to grab a drink, and how the holidays can be a really challenging time. And maybe that's a challenge for you too. Okay. There is this transference often that happens with the eating disorder, where when somebody's in recovery from eating disorder, they might tend to gravitate toward the alcohol a little bit. And it can be for numbing, but it can also be because maybe you come from a family where there's alcoholism in the bloodline, maybe your family's big drinkers. Okay. And that's the thing you have to remember, on any level, whether you're somebody who restricts or you're an emotional eater or you're a binger or you're a bulimic or you're just hyper conscious about the way your body looks. So you're constantly dieting. There can be this piece that you have to hold at the forefront of your consciousness, that it really isn't about the food at the end of the day. What you're doing is you're taking these feelings, what you're feeling, your experience that's going on inside that feels too overwhelming, and you're making it about the food instead. You're taking that energy and you're making the food the scapegoat for it, because then it puts it outside of you. So it gives you like a little distance from your activation. Now you don't feel so overwhelmed because, well, the food's handling that. For somebody that binges, it's like it's just pushing it down. And people who overeat, overindulge, it can serve a lot of purposes. Sometimes it's like I was saying, you are sitting at the table, you got, relatives looking at what you dished yourself up to eat, at the holidays. Maybe they've already made some comments about your body that made you feel uncomfortable. They're already infringing on your boundaries. Now they're looking at what you plated up. They're making judgments about your food. They're telling you should put a little of that back. Maybe you should add a little bit of this. They're starting to tell you how you should be eating. This happens. It happens. And let me tell you, if you're somebody who struggles with eating disorder issues, you will have people around you that will always be hyper conscious of the way that you are eating, and they will feel that it's their right to make commentary about it, especially if they're your loved one and they don't understand how much that can be activated. And in fact, it can provoke the fuck-its. It can. It can be like, I actually don't like to use the word trigger, okay, so much. I know I used it earlier, but it's just kind of a buzzword, right? I don't like the word trigger so much because I don't really feel it's an accurate statement. I feel that triggers are actually instigators. It's usually somebody outside of yourself or something outside of yourself is just like, right? And a lot of times, I have to say, with eating disorder, it revolves around boundaries. And so you learn to have the food become the way of exercising boundaries instead of you standing up and just speaking your truth and saying, hey, you know what? I need you to back off right now. This is my body. I don't need to hear your opinions about it. It doesn't matter to me whether you think it's attractive or whether I need to drop weight or gain weight or whatever it may be. Right now, you need to let me make my own food choices, and you need to stop hyper managing me because you're making me feel very uncomfortable. And the more uncomfortable you're making me, the more it actually drives those behaviors. Okay. So that may be the case if you're in a family dynamic. Let's say you're actively in a recovery process. It's important that you do let your family know that when they're doing this, it's not supportive. It's not supportive of you moving into recovery because they're actually creating more of the same type of energy that drives you into these behaviors. And it can be tricky. And this is honestly why in any recovery process, there needs to be the family on board as well, or the loved one on board as well. A good general rule of thumb is that you should never, absolutely never, ever, ever make comments about somebody else's food choices. It's not your place. And even when it comes to children, you have to be careful about how you talk to them about food so they don't develop unhealthy relationships with food and their bodies. And children will often mimic what they see in their environment with the adults around them. Okay, these pieces are really important. So, if you are concerned about somebody, let's say, and you're concerned about their relationship with food, you feel like there might be a problem, okay? And let's say that you are a cross watcher here. You have somebody you love that struggles with these issues. The time to bring it up is not in front of everybody at the dinner table, during the holidays. And it's also about your delivery and having some sensitivity around it. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I feel it's better handled in most cases where there's an active problem that's already been established within a therapeutic setting or within the setting of a support group. But if you're going to talk to that person about it, you need to come to it more from the place of, instead of shaming them and picking apart what they're eating and telling them what they should be eating, and harshing on them, it's more of coming from the place of, I love you and I'm concerned, I love you and I'm concerned. And I know that this is a sensitive topic, but I just wanted to talk to you and ask you, is there something going on? Are you struggling with something? You can open it up privately and sensitively. But so many times people think the way to help somebody is by telling them how to eat, micromanaging what they're doing, picking apart every aspect of their body, like, well, you put on a lot of weight, like you shouldn't be eating that. And actually, that just creates more issues because it can produce the fuckets. It can make the person rebel. All right. And this is because a lot of these issues have to do around these boundaries. Okay. What happens often with eating disorder is the person does not know how to have good boundaries. And so they take on energy that's not theirs. And then they feel emotionally overwhelmed by their environment. They tend to be very sensitive people, okay? People who struggle with eating disorder feel things deeply. You'll hear this repeatedly. They feel like they feel too much. Like what I feel is too activated. It's too much. It feels like it could swallow me whole. So I need to disconnect from it. Okay. So obviously, coming at somebody from that angle where you're being very provoking, activating, picking them apart, it's only going to make them feel like they got to get really like overly aggressive with their boundaries since they don't know how to exercise that in the right way. So how could that look externally just for the cross watchers? If you're struggling with supporting a loved one, a family member that has issues with heavy restriction, it can make them not eat. They'll go deeper into it, okay? And if it's somebody that struggles more with overindulgence, they'll eat that stuff in excess just to spite you. And it's a way for them to kind of like establish a boundary line. And for those of you who do struggle with these issues, you might be like, I can't tell you like how many times when I was actively, really struggling in my eating disorder that I had somebody pick apart what I was eating. And it really made me just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna eat even more of it. You know what I'm saying? And I've learned over time to kind of like speak up for myself. Like I've found that sometimes, people will just think that they can, make judgments about you or have free reign to comment on what you're eating because they think that you need to drop so many more pounds so you look like the ideal or whatever. And maybe you're completely at home in your body, like you don't have a problem with your body. You're not dealing with any health challenges, you're not compromised. You're able to exercise and you feel good. Okay. Maybe your body's just, it looks different than what it looks like in the fashion magazines. And chances are, in fact, like 99% of the time, chances are that you don't look like those pictures in the fashion magazines. And yet you have somebody that you're dealing with that wants you to, be in this place, match these ideals. And since you're not that, they make judgments about what you eat. It can cause a lot of backlash. Look at this. Look at it. Yeah, it can be very controlling, it can be very controlling, these ways that we can you know sort of run a narrative over other people's bodies and their choices, and it's not appropriate. It's never appropriate. I also feel like this is when your vices can really come front and center during the holidays, right? You're around this food, you're around the alcohol, and it can be so easy, especially when you're having this kind of issue around the dinner table where you have people judging your food or making comments about your body, that it can be very activating, and you can kind of get caught up in the moment as well. And at the time, you don't realize that it's you kind of like making a statement about your boundaries or wanting to disconnect from what you're feeling because it's too overwhelming. But it can be really tempting to like, hit the alcohol or, overindulge and just sort of numb yourself out from what you're really feeling, rather than exercising healthy boundaries. And instead of having the food do the talking for you, or instead of numbing out what you're feeling by having a binge or not being conscious of your experience, you instead can learn to just sort of like speak up for yourself and say, hey, you know what? This is my body, and what I eat is my business, and I didn't ask for your opinion. So, I'm here to have a good time, and don't harsh on mine, you know? I mean, I can easily do it at this stage in the game for myself, but I've been in recovery for a long time. Not everybody feels as confident, standing up for themselves. So I find what can help when you're first starting to assert your boundaries instead of letting the food do the talking for you is to say, I have to tell you, I feel really uncomfortable when you are micromanaging my choices like that, or when you are pointing out things about my body. It's pretty interesting what happens when you just simply say that. Like, I feel really uncomfortable with you saying that. I feel really uncomfortable. You're owning what you feel. You're not saying you're making me feel, okay? Stay in empowering I statements. But if you say, I feel really uncomfortable when you start telling me what I should be eating, that's all you have to say. It throws people for a loop because it makes them kind of reflect for a moment, like, oh, wait, maybe I'm trespassing. Okay. Sometimes it's just so automatic in our culture that people just think it's totally acceptable to make commentary about other people's bodies, their food choices, that we never really even consider that it's not appropriate, actually, and that it's none of your business, and that you shouldn't be asking anybody, oh, are you on a diet right now? Or what diet are you doing? Any of this. Like, you never know what somebody's experience is, and it's never appropriate. And you should never be picking apart somebody's body or what they're eating. And it's so strange to me because as somebody who struggled with food and body image issues, never once in my life have I done that. Have I looked at what somebody was eating and been like, well, you shouldn't eat that, and you should eat this instead. Maybe you should take a little less of that, or maybe you should have a little more of this, or don't you think you should slow down? Or gosh, you look like you put on like a little weight there, Are you gonna do something about that? Are you gonna go on and I mean, come on, man. Like, what is that? Talk about controlling. All right. So we have to understand how much boundaries come into play. Usually you're dealing with these kind of dynamics in your life, and that's what activates the behavior. So the first step is don't make it about the food. Okay. You don't need to numb out from it. And if you have to ease into this, this is okay, but I hope you'll start to give yourself these experiences during the holidays where when you do run into this issue, instead of just like sucking it up and not saying anything or getting angry and like, oh, I'll show you, I'm going to eat all of it now, or going and, throwing back the drink so you can just numb out from it. Why don't you instead just practice that and say, that makes me I really feel uncomfortable. I really feel uncomfortable to know like you're watching what I'm eating. Please don't watch me eat. It kind of highlights to people that, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm being inappropriate. You might get a heated reaction. I do have to say, you might, okay? But if you do, if they get like snapped back at you, well, I'm just concerned about you. And you say, okay, well, I'm doing fine. You know what I'm saying? Just stay balanced. I'm doing fine. I'm feeling good. I'm enjoying myself. Like, please don't watch me eat. Really, I feel very uncomfortable to know you're watching me eat or you're watching me dish up food. Awkward. You know what I'm saying? It's a way to kind of like point out that it's kind of cringe, okay? And trying to bring a little bit more of that lightness in it, Don't trip about it too much. What happens is sometimes it can be a hook, and people don't realize that, A lot of times, especially if this is a family dynamic, there can be already like codependent threads that that run through the holiday festivities. Okay, so that can be a hook. Like, they know it's going to activate you. They know you're not going to be happy about that. They know that they're kind of, it's shaming somebody is what it's doing when you do that, especially when you're doing it at the dinner table or you're doing it in front of other guests. You're shaming that person. And that's something that really needs to be remembered with food and body image issues, is that these kind of issues, eating disorder, these challenges, like, they thrive in secrecy and shame. So it's very counterproductive. It's automatically a given that if you are hoping to overcome these challenges, at some point you have to learn to start to speak up for yourself and let people know what's appropriate and what's not. Because this is also very necessary for those who have these challenges. And if you're just starting to move away from dieting and you're exploring intuitive eating, it's going to be hard at first. I have to tell you, it will be, because as you break away from this whole like diet mentality, you know, your friends, your family, be patient with them too, because they're used to you always being on a diet. All right. So let's look at more the EDNOS area. Let's say you don't have like active eating disorder, or you're not somebody who's recovered from eating disorder. Let's say that you are more somebody that you've always been on a diet just because that's what everybody else does. But now you're at the place where you realize, like, I really want to break away from this because it feels like it's got a little too much of a hold on me, or it's really having a damaging effect on my relationship with food and my body. When you initially break away from this and you go to the holiday gathering, okay, you probably in the past talked to your friends and your family, your loved ones about, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to just have a cheat day, or I'm going to just, you know, make sure that I only take so much of this food on my plate. And, you know, you probably talked about this stuff. This was the topic of conversation. So you can't be mad at these people if they engage in these conversations with you right off the bat, because it's what they're familiar with, especially if this is your first time out the gate, all right, and you're starting to adopt an intuitive eating approach. So be gentle, all right? Be gentle with them and understand that you're all in a learning process together. And a lot of people are just sort of programmed to, you know, it's the way they've been programmed. It's just socially acceptable to talk about another person's body, to talk about their weight, to talk about a diet they should try, you know. I hate to say it, but it's true. And you know it's true. We've all experienced this, those of us who have had these challenges. It's a pretty common experience, but it's actually not appropriate. It's not appropriate at all. And it takes time to unravel that. So be sensitive about it too. Don't get all aggro and start some big family argument during the holidays either, okay? But I think it's good. Don't turn to your vices, man, okay? Don't turn to your vices. And yeah, speak your truth. King of Swords. Lay down your boundary lines by communicating them clearly, okay? And you can do it playfully. Like I was saying, like, hey, man, you know, I eat what I want. That's usually what I say. I kind of put a little fun spin on it. You can do it in such a way where it doesn't have to cause offense. You know, if somebody's like looking at what I'm eating, I'll be like, look, dude, I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm like carpeting up in here, you know? Okay. So just, you know, define your own boundary lines by communicating them. Okay. You don't need to let the food do the talking for you. It also doesn't need to be combative. And be sensitive as you start to show people that you're doing something new. Okay. Let's say you are one of that set, you know, you're used to chronic dieting. Now you're at the holiday gatherings, the parties, and all your friends and all your loved ones. They keep bringing up dieting. They keep talking about not wanting to gain weight during the holidays. They keep talking about the little tricks and tips they're using to prevent holiday weight gain, whatever, you know. You might want to just let them know, like, hey, I know we always talked about this in the past, but I'm actually trying something new. It's really different for me. And, you know, I understand that you're used to me talking about diets, or you're used to me being fixated on my weight, or you're used to that being the topic of conversation, but I'm not really focusing on that kind of conversation right now. And we could get into that sometime, but it's the holidays and we're at the party and we're having fun. But I'm not on a diet right now, and I'm not worried about my weight. I'm just like trying to enjoy myself and listen to my body. And, you know, Maybe another time we can go into that more if you feel like it. If you don't, you don't, you know. But it's also this piece like starting to pull yourself away from those conversations that revolve around that as well, letting people know you're doing something a little different. These are other ways of sort of like establishing boundary lines, okay? And it doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to get into a big discussion about it. Don't make it a debate. That kind of stuff happens a lot at this time of year. All right. But yes, this is about you, really listening to your intuition and paying attention to how you're feeling with the high priestess here and understanding that, it's your body, it's your food, it's your experience. Okay. And you have the ability to navigate your emotions and feel what you're feeling and establish your own boundaries and your own needs, by paying attention to that internal guidance, that internal authority, rather than allowing other people's external judgments have such an effect on you, right? And then crossing influence here, look, we got the star, all right? So this is also the piece about, don't worry about, taking care of everybody else and making sure that they're okay, making sure that, they're comfortable with your food choices. You don't need to take that on. I see this here, just I'm noticing both vessels are like sort of being poured out. And I think that there's probably a lot of you that are used to restricting at this time of year, and you probably feel uncomfortable about sort of like lifting the reins on that. Okay, so this is a cue here. First of all, don't take on things you don't want to take on at this time of year. If you don't want to go to all the different gatherings, don't, make sure you're communicating those boundaries so you're not depleting yourself, not feeling like your needs aren't being met. The only person who can truly meet your needs is you. It has to begin with you. And this is also a lesson that has to be learned if you struggle with these issues. So remember to turn down, some of those social obligations. They're not obligations, they're social. They're supposed to be fun, right? If you know that a certain environment's going to be too activating for you, or you're just not in the mood for it, or you already feel really stretched thin, or you just want some downtime, you want some time out from it, you need some time to heal, relax, whatever, allow yourself to have that and turn down some of those holiday invitations. You don't have to go to every holiday party. You don't have to go to every single family function, especially if there's multiple families to attend to. Like that can be really overwhelming. So this is about remembering to only take on what you feel you can take on without depleting yourself. Don't pour everything out nurturing everybody else's needs. Your first responsibility is to be able to attend to your needs. So turn one of those vessels up, let a little love in for yourself. Okay, do things that are fulfilling for yourself at this time, and allow yourself to enjoy the treats that are on offer at this time of year. So I did talk about practicalities. Let's look at the nuts and bolts. Let's say this is your first holiday season as an intuitive eater, and you're really worried about it because you're looking at this piece of like, okay, there's no food restrictions. Wow, I'm used to having all these rules around food. Like I only let myself have this on this day, or, maybe only in a certain quantity. You're not used to letting your hunger and your biological signals, your fullness, your satiety. You're not used to allowing this to be the directive of your eating experiences. You're used to letting outside authorities sort of like call those shots for you, okay? So the first way to go about this that can be very helpful is actually an exercise that's outlined in the book, Intuitive Eating. And it's a core principle that we work with when we're learning how to intuitive eat. And that's when we go to lift all food restrictions, okay, we're not just like going, woo, yeah, especially if you're somebody, this is even more important. If you're coming from a history of having intense restriction, okay, if you're used to really restricting yourself, if you're somebody who micromanages your food, if you're somebody who has a hard time indulging, okay, and you feel a lot of guilt when you do not want to just go and lift the reins and be unconscious about this, okay? It's so important to approach this in a more balanced way. So what I would do is I would write up a list, okay, of all of your favorite treats, okay? Everything, all those special foods that you love during the holidays. I'm not talking about worrying about if you normally let yourself have that stuff or not. Just write down all the stuff that you love. Like, let's say, you could wave a magic wand and you could eat absolutely anything you wanted to. With intuitive eating, you can, okay? But we're going to approach it mindfully, all right? You can eat whatever you want. So at first, sometimes what happens with intuitive eating, and you'll hear this a lot on social media. Oh, intuitive eating just supports, overindulging in foods that are not beneficial for you, and it doesn't respect health. Nonsense. That's not true. In fact, one of the steps of intuitive eating is gentle nutrition. It absolutely does bring this into play. I sort of flip-flop things with intuitive eating with my approach, and that's been based on my own history and my own experience. This piece here, that if you lift food restrictions, okay, and you just lift that right out the gate, that can be very overwhelming for somebody who has a history of restriction or micromanaging their diet. So much so that it can actually drive them to the opposite end, where then they experience binging behavior. This was my experience, okay? And I applied that from what I learned in my own experience and what I've encountered in many other people to bring a little bit of common sense into the experience, okay? So I've done the reverse. I've taken the last step of intuitive eating, gentle nutrition, and I put it in the forefront. Because it's important to know that we have a certain responsibility when it comes to nourishing our bodies. We want to be mindful of that. And especially during the holidays, when it's a time of high stress and when you may be going through, some interesting dynamics within your family, and you may already have activation of your nervous system, or you may already be depressed because you deal with seasonal affective disorder or whatever it may be, all right? Or it's just a hard time of year for you. Even more reason for you to be aware of just really giving your body good nourishment. Make sure that you're eating well and that you feel really grounded and you feel really supported on that level, okay? So I think it always makes sense to put gentle nutrition first when you're coming to intuitive eating. It shouldn't be the last step. It should be the first step, because it helps people more easily transition into this lifestyle. So this is going to be just the first video. This is what we're covering, okay, for today. Next week, I'll bring another in. I think I'm going to continue this series even beyond the PANCHAKARMA work, okay? We're going to do this all through the holidays. We'll build on this. I'll come on every Thursday with a live about this, about how you can integrate intuitive eating through the holidays. And we'll move through it together as a group. We'll also get our book club going, and I'll finish off with that, okay, about when we'll be launching that. So what I would say is, what you really want to do is write down a list of all those foods, all those things that if you could wave a magic wand and it wouldn't make any difference in terms of, like, you probably likely eat because of the way you think it'll make your body look, okay? This is what most people do. If you could eat whatever you wanted, it didn't matter, wouldn't have any effect on your physical appearance, it wouldn't have any negative result, what would you eat? What are those treats? What are those things that are like that special stuff at the holidays that is like your Achilles heel as you view it? It's your kryptonite. Like, you can never turn that down. Make a big list of all those foods you love that you normally do not allow yourself to enjoy. And then what you can do is, one by one, every single one of those foods, allow yourself to have them during the holidays, but enjoy them. Enjoy them in moderation. So let's say you're at a holiday party, okay? And let's say you're like, okay, normally I would only allow myself to have one treat, all right? Let's just say that's your story. I'm just giving an example so you know how to apply it. But let's say you see there's 5 different things on your list that are like, they're on my list of, like, my foods that I normally don't allow myself to eat. Okay, well, you can actually allow yourself to bring all 5 of those foods onto your plate. All right. You don't have to just stick to one. So already you're already stepping out of your usual control mechanism, right? You're bringing in more of it. But just, serve yourself up a plate and enjoy it, okay? Enjoy it thoroughly. Sit down, enjoy it, enjoy the smells, enjoy the flavors, the mouthfeel, the texture of the food. Just really allow yourself to enjoy it. And as you're enjoying it, pay attention to what's going on in your body. Are you full? Are you satisfied? Are you not? Can you eat a little more? Okay. Let's say you finish your plate and you're like, you know what? I still want more. You can go and dish yourself up some more. But do it in this way so you stay conscious through the process. That's a way you can intuitively eat and allow yourself to indulge. And you can have whatever you want, but you're still bringing in this component where you're staying really connected to your body and the experience. And yet there's still sort of a container around it, right? You're using your plate as the container, one plate at a time. And I check in with myself afterwards. Is that enough? Do I want more? Let's say that you don't want more then, but you're like, you have FOMO, fear of missing out, right? I know I'll want more later. Well, you can just ask, hey, this was so good. I'd love to have some more of this. Can I take a plate home with me? I would love to have some more of this, but I'm full right now. Okay. So that's a way you can work around that too. But let a little of the treats in, let a little of the fun stuff in. It doesn't have to be also, also heavy and serious. Okay. So that's a way you can kind of ease into this process of allowing yourself to have some treats. Cut of the deck energy. Okay. Now it's upright. All right. This is good. You exercising healthy boundaries. You also taking responsibility, understanding I can sample whatever I want. I just need to make sure I stay connected to the experience. That's it. All right. So there's no need for you to have guilt, but I do recommend that the more charged of an issue this is for you, the more you should enter this territory sensitively. All right. And for some of you, that may look like one food at a time. All right. And just allowing yourself to have some of it. And maybe it's just a few bites at first. Okay. You have to listen to where you're at. It's going to be different for everybody. But I encourage you to allow yourself this holiday season to indulge in every single one of those foods that you have on that list, but on a level that feels safe for you to explore. Okay? No guilt around it. No guilt around it. And, do be sure to talk to your support person that you have lined up, as you move through this, because you may notice stuff comes up for you and you might need the benefit of their sounding board. And in some cases, their perspective, okay? It can be helpful. And on the other side there, yeah, look, this is about you kind of like writing a new story about what the holidays are about for you, that it's okay if you don't go to every engagement. It's okay if you create time and space for yourself because you feel overwhelmed and you just need some time to drop in alone and nurture yourself. Now is the time to be mindful of really making sure you're nourishing your body properly and that you're listening to your body and getting in touch with your body. But you can also have fun too, right? And you can indulge and you can do it in such a way that you don't have to disconnect. Okay. And you can learn to speak your truth and kind of like let people know what the news story is, and how you're approaching things now. And I think you'll find that it doesn't have to be a negative experience. You can actually really enjoy yourself. You don't have to have the heaviness you usually have, and you can find more balance. And sometimes you have to go more extreme initially in order to establish that boundary line. But over time, you'll work it out. It's a learning curve, okay? And I think what we'll do is next, let's see. I think next week we will start the book club for the yoga book we are reading, which is the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali. And why don't we say we dive into that, let's say, next Saturday, okay? I'm not sure what time, but we'll have our first kind of drop in around that. So it could be that could just be the introduction, so maybe I'll touch base on some of the opening material. And even if you haven't gotten the book yet, you can drop in and sort of hear the discussion on it. Maybe it'll pique your interest. And we'll kind of have maybe 2 Saturdays a month that we meet to drop in around the book and share our experiences. If you want to get the book ahead of time, it is the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali, or How to Know God. There's many translations out there, and it's a book about the path of yoga. And it can be very supportive of this process because it's all practices that really bring you more into that meditative space, bring you into your body, help you understand what those feelings, those sensations are as you're working the path of yoga. So it definitely will bring the mindful piece forward. And I think it can be really helpful in navigating the holidays for those with food and body image issues. All right. So let's bring that in. We'll bring in the first live around that next Saturday for our book club. And even if you haven't read the book, but you're interested in participating, show up. Let's see what happens. And I'll go ahead and I'll read the first chapter just so I can be a little step ahead and I can hold that space and bring the energy in of the first chapter. And then maybe you can play catch up, okay? We'll only go into the first chapter. That way you don't have to be overwhelmed. And, you know, we can all take it at our own pace, but maybe we'll agree to reach a certain point in the book, you know, just as a group. And we'll discuss that in that first live drop-in. So do look for that. And thank you to those of you who showed up during the live and were able to take it in. And for those of you who catch the replay, I hope you can have a different experience this holiday season. And thank you for being on this journey with me. Feels good to have a drop-in point. And I hope more of you will start to be comfortable bringing your voices in. I know it's not always the easiest thing for people, but this is a space where you are free to do that. And I will make sure to maintain the respectfulness of this space, all right? So don't worry about no trolls or none of that, all right? All right, take care.